The fifth dimension does not add things. She removes it, and what comes out, it does not come back. There's something that no one tells you about the fifth dimension. It's not a place where you arrive and that's it. Mission accomplished, medal on your chest. It is a frequency that reorganizes everything, and when I say everything, it is everything. Things that were once part of your life, such as breathing, simply cease to exist. Not because you have consciously decided to eliminate, but because after spiritual awakening, certain inner structures collapse and there is no turning back. It's like trying to put water back into the cloud after it turns to rain. Impossible, because the shape has changed forever. You can even try to force it. You can go to therapy to recover. You may want to go back to who you were before, but the body doesn't let you. The soul doesn't accept it. The high consciousness simply rejects it. And look at this interesting paradox. Most people seek the final awakening, thinking that they will gain superpowers, special abilities, some kind of Hollywood lighting with the right to a golden aura. But the truth? What really happens is that you lose things. 7 specific things that never come back. And these losses, believe me, are the greatest gifts that spiritual ascension can give you. Because there are losses that liberate more than any achievement. Life after awakening is not about accumulating, it is about letting go. And each of these 7 things that I'm going to share here represents a layer of illusion that falls, an invisible prison that opens, a chain that breaks. If you've been there, you'll recognize yourself in every word. If you haven't already, this text can be the map that shows you exactly what to expect when you get there. So take a deep breath, because what you are going to read now is not a spiritual theory to decorate the bookshelf. It is real, raw, honest experience about what changes when consciousness truly expands. And if something here resonates strongly in your chest, leave the number 5 in the comments, because that number carries the exact frequency of the 5th dimension, and I want to know how many souls around here already feel that vibration. You know that feeling of constantly explaining yourself, to feel that you need to justify every choice, every move, every decision you make in life. Well, there is something curious that happens when someone goes through spiritual awakening and reaches a higher consciousness. This need simply disappears. It's not that the person becomes indifferent or cold, nothing like that. It is that something within it is integrated in such a way that external opinion ceases to be the yardstick that measures its value. Anyone who has experienced this knows exactly what I'm talking about. It's as if an inner voice has finally gained enough strength to silence all the noise from outside. Think with me. How many times have you caught yourself in a conversation trying to convince someone that your path makes sense? Elaborating arguments, looking for perfect words, almost begging to be understood? After the 5th spiritual dimension, that game is over. Not because you have become arrogant, but because internal integration has reached a point where external validation has completely lost power. The defensive ego, the one that has to prove, justify, and defend itself all the time, it just doesn't survive that level of consciousness. It's like trying to keep ice in the desert. There's no way. It's going to melt anyway. Imagine a child trying to explain to another why he prefers blue instead of red. Basically, it has no logical explanation. It is just an internal preference, something that resonates with it. After spiritual awakening, the whole life becomes like this. Their choices stop needing an audience, approval, applause. You can even share when someone genuinely asks, but you no longer feel that urgency to make the other understand. There are people who will find you strange, others will question you, and that's okay. Because deep down, where spiritual ascension has taken you, there is a peace that does not depend on anyone agreeing with you. And the most interesting thing is that this releases an absurd energy. Think about the amount of mental and emotional strength you spend trying to explain yourself for an entire week. Now imagine all this energy being redirected to your own evolution, to your projects, to your peace. Life after waking up brings exactly that. You stop bleeding energy trying to convince the audience and start really investing in yourself. And when that happens, something starts to change, not only inside, but also around. The human mind loves to create catastrophic scenarios, doesn't it? That what if this happens? What if that goes wrong? What if I can't do it? It's a horror movie that runs in your head 24 hours a day, and we don't even realize that we've become hostage to it. But there is an interesting phenomenon that happens when someone reaches the fifth spiritual dimension. This fear of the future simply loses its strength. It's not that life becomes a fairy tale where everything is predictable and right, far from it. What changes is that an inner trust, deep and silent, begins to replace that unhealthy need to control every detail of what lies ahead. Think of a person who has spent years obsessively planning every step, creating plan A, B, C, D, and even Z for any eventuality. After the spiritual awakening, she continues to be responsible. She continues to make conscious choices, but that mental urgency that did not let her sleep peacefully simply disappears. It's as if the body and mind finally understand that total control has always been an illusion. You know when you hold the sand tightly and it slips through your fingers? Well, trying to control the future is exactly like that. After heightened consciousness, the hand relaxes and paradoxically more sand remains in the palm. There are people who confuse this with irresponsibility or with that talk of, "Let life take me." Nothing to do. The difference is subtle but profound. You act, you plan, you move, but without that tightness in the chest that came with it before. A practical example. Before, when making an important decision, the person spent weeks brooding, losing sleep, creating 1,000 possible scenarios. After the spiritual ascension, she analyzes, chooses, and follows, trusting that even if it goes differently than expected, she will know how to deal with it. It is exchanging anxiety for presence, fear for confidence. And the body feels this before the mind. That tension in my shoulders, that knot in my stomach, that short breath that accompanied any major decision, all of that begins to dissolve. Life after awakening doesn't mean that challenges stop appearing, but it does mean that you stop anticipating catastrophes that don't even exist yet. And when you release that energy that was stuck in the anxiety of tomorrow, it can finally be used in the present. And it is precisely in this present that something else begins to become impossible to ignore. There are places and people that suck our energy, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. That meeting that you leave exhausted, that environment that weighs on your chest, that conversation that seems to suck every drop of vitality. Before the spiritual awakening, we even noticed this tiredness, but we ignored it, pushed it under the rug, thought it was freshness of our own head. After the fifth spiritual dimension, something changes radically. The body starts to warn before, in a clear and impossible to ignore way. It's as if an internal alarm was activated, and this time you can no longer turn it off in snooze mode. High consciousness brings quite a gift, heightened energetic sensitivity. This means that you enter a heavy environment, and in minutes you already feel the weight. Talk to someone who is vibrating low, and the fatigue comes quickly, really, physically. It is not judgment, it is not thinking that you are better than anyone else. It is simply that after spiritual ascension, your energy system stops accepting what no longer resonates. Imagine a glass of clean water. Can you throw mud in there again? You can do it, but it will look wrong, it will bother you. You will scream that it no longer belongs there. The limit is crystal clear, you know? Those situations that you used to endure out of politeness, out of obligation, out of fear of hurting someone, now become unbearable. You can even enter that toxic environment. You can even participate in that draining meeting. You can even stay in that relationship that no longer nourishes but cannot remain. It's physical, it's real. It's like trying to breathe underwater. It takes a few seconds, but then you have to rise to the surface. And it's no use forcing, it's no use convincing yourself that everything is fine, because the body doesn't lie after the final awakening. There are people who interpret this as selfishness, as if the person had become antisocial or arrogant. But those who live it know that it is exactly the opposite. It is self-care at a deep level. It is respecting one's own energy as something sacred. You know when you realize that spending 2 hours at a party that doesn't make sense cost you 3 days to recover? Well, after waking up, these accounts become very clear. And when you start honoring those boundaries, protecting your vibrations seriously, something interesting happens. You stop measuring your journey by the clock of others. Look at what a cruel trap the mind can create. You look to the side, you see someone who seems to be light years ahead on the spiritual path, and that feeling of backwardness beats hard in your chest. So-and-so woke up 5 years ago and I'm still here fighting with the same standards. Ciclano already lives in the 5th dimension, and I don't even know if I've reached the 3rd. This game of comparison is one of the most destructive that exists, and the worst thing is that it disguises itself as humility, healthy self-criticism. But after spiritual awakening, something profound ends. You simply stop measuring your time by other people's time. Higher consciousness brings a visceral understanding that each soul carries unique baggage, faces unique battles, and has absolutely perfect timing for its own evolution. Think of a tree. Have you ever seen someone say that an oak tree is late because it takes longer to grow than a pine tree? It doesn't make any sense, right? Each one has its rhythm, its structure, its way of touching the sky. After the spiritual 5th dimension, this truth ceases to be a beautiful concept and becomes something that you feel on your skin, in your bones, in your breath. There is a practical example that illustrates this well. Imagine 2 people who started meditating on the same day. One of them has deep insights in the first few weeks. The other takes months to feel any real change. Before spiritual ascension, this second person would probably feel frustrated, inadequate, less evolved. After the final awakening, she understands that perhaps her journey requires deeper groundwork, a cleansing of layers that the first person doesn't even have. It's not better or worse, it's different. And different is perfect when you stop competing spiritually, because that's what comparison creates in the end, an invisible competition where no one wins. You spend your whole life chasing milestones that aren't even yours, trying to reach levels that make sense to someone else's soul, not your own. After awakening, this mad rush simply loses its meaning. You begin to walk at your own pace, honoring every step, every stumble, every achievement as part of something bigger that your mind can't even fully comprehend. And when this comparison falls, you finally have the internal space to realize that there are entire versions of you that no longer fit in the luggage. We cling to the strangest things in this life, but perhaps nothing is as curious as the attachment we create to our own old selves. You know that person you were 5 years ago? The one who had other dreams, other beliefs, other priorities? Well, there are people who carry this version as if it were a backpack full of stones, refusing to let go. After spiritual awakening, it is impossible to continue carrying this weight, not because you consciously decide to let go, but because this old version simply doesn't represent you anymore, doesn't define you anymore, doesn't support you anymore. It's like trying to put on an outfit from when you were 10. It can even go in with a lot of effort, but it will tighten, it will bother, it will limit every movement. After the 5th spiritual dimension, trying to get back to who you were before hurts more than moving on. And look how interesting, many people around may not understand this transformation. Old friends may be strange, family may question, colleagues may think that you have changed too much. And it really did, because the high consciousness does not leave anyone the same. There is a very practical example of this. Think of a person who has always been the class clown, the one who made everyone laugh, who took everything as a joke. Suddenly, after the spiritual ascension, he can no longer maintain this mask. Not because she became boring or lost her sense of humor, but because that character was a defense, a way of not feeling, of not connecting deeply. When she tries to return to this role, the discomfort is physical. It's as if the body screams, "That's not true about you anymore." And then comes the mourning, because it is really a mourning. You need to say goodbye to parts of yourself that were important, that served a purpose, that helped you survive in certain phases. After the final awakening, honoring these old versions means giving thanks for them and letting them go. Not with anger, not with shame, but with gratitude for what they were and clarity of what they are no more. Life after awakening requires this courage to become unknown even to oneself, to wake up one day and not completely recognize the person in the mirror, but to feel deep down that this stranger is truer than all previous versions. And when you finally allow this rebirth, you discover that there is something outside that also no longer asks permission to exist. Likes, comments, compliments, that look of approval, the smile that confirms that you did it right. External validation moves mountains in most people's lives, and we don't even realize how much we are hostages to it. Important decisions being made, not for what makes sense inside, but for what will generate less criticism outside. Entire paths being traced not by the voice of the soul, but by the expectation of the public. After spiritual awakening, this dependence simply collapses. Not all of a sudden, not in a snap of the fingers, but gradually, like ice melting in the sun. The spiritual fifth dimension brings an inner certainty that is silent, discreet, but unbreakable. It's different from arrogance, completely different. Arrogance needs to scream, it needs to prove, it needs the audience to exist. This certainty that comes after the raised consciousness is the opposite. It doesn't need anyone watching, it doesn't need applause, it doesn't even need to be seen. It simply is. Imagine a tree in the middle of the forest. It grows because it is in its nature to grow, not because someone is there clapping at each new branch that grows. There is a very real example of this. Think of a person who has always posted each achievement on social networks, anxiously waiting for the likes and comments that validated his success. After the spiritual ascension, she may even continue to share things, but the relationship changes completely. If there's engagement, cool. If you don't, it's also okay. The experience itself, the achievement itself, the experience itself are already complete, regardless of how many people commented or liked it. It's like eating delicious food alone. The taste doesn't diminish because there's no one at the table confirming that it's tasty. And look at the freedom that this brings. You can finally experiment, make mistakes, change your mind without worrying about what people will think. You can start that project that no one thinks will work. You can abandon that career that everyone admires, but that sucks you inside. It can be strange, it can be different, it can be misunderstood, and that's absolutely fine. After the final awakening, validation no longer comes from the outside. It is born silently from within. And when you no longer need an audience to feel whole, you discover that there is a kind of loneliness that no longer scares you, that actually turns into something totally different. This one is deep. It messes with layers that most people don't even know exist. The fear of being alone with oneself is perhaps one of the most universal and at the same time most denied fears of humanity. We fill every second of silence with noise, music, television, social networks, empty conversations, anything that prevents the real encounter with those who live inside our own skin. Because deep down, there's a silent terror of looking inside and not liking what you're going to find. After the spiritual awakening, something almost magical happens. The silence stops frightening. The fifth spiritual dimension completely transforms the relationship with loneliness. It's not that you become a hermit who hates people and wants to live isolated in a cave, nothing like that. It is that solitude ceases to weigh down, to seem like a punishment, to be something that needs to be avoided at all costs. That moment of being alone, without a cell phone, without distraction, with nothing to do but simply be, this becomes refuge, not prison. Presence becomes home, you know? It's like finally finding a place where you can take off all the masks, drop all the performances, and just exist. There is a very clear example of this. Before heightened consciousness, a person can panic about a weekend alone. You're going to plan 1,000 things. You're going to call everyone. You're going to do anything so you don't have to face your own reflection without distraction. After spiritual ascension, that same person may even actively choose to spend time alone, not because she became antisocial, but because she discovered that there is a quality of peace, of clarity, of connection with herself that only happens in silence. It is exchanging the fear of emptiness for curiosity about what this space can reveal. And here is the crucial point. Emptiness becomes space. That scary hole that seemed about to swallow you turns into an open field full of possibilities. After the final awakening, you realize that it was never truly empty. It was just a space you were afraid to inhabit. Life after awakening teaches that being alone with yourself is not loneliness in the sad sense of the word. It is real intimacy. It is true friendship with the only person who will accompany you from the first breath to the last. And when you make peace with that presence, when silence becomes an ally instead of an enemy, everything changes because you finally understand that you were never really alone. The fifth dimension does not take away important things. It takes away what was no longer true. And then, after all this, the question that remains is, are you ready to let go of what doesn't come back? Because look, it's one thing to read about these 7 transformations. It's quite another to live each one of them in the flesh. The spiritual fifth dimension does not ask permission to enter your life. It simply arrives. And when it arrives, there is no negotiation. You can resist, you can try to hold on to the old versions, you can beg the universe to let you continue to need external validation, but do you know what's going to happen? It will hurt more, much more. So tell me something, how many of these 7 things are you still trying to force back into your life? How many times this week have you found yourself seeking approval that no longer makes a difference? How many hours have you wasted comparing your spiritual awakening to that of others? How many nights have you spent anxiously about a future that hasn't even arrived yet? He looks inside with brutal honesty and answers, are you fighting spiritual ascension, or finally accepting that after the final awakening, some doors close forever? And that's exactly what needs to happen, because life after awakening is not a fairy tale. It is a rebirth that requires courage. Courage to be misunderstood. Courage to lose people who no longer vibrate at the same frequency. Courage to look in the mirror and not completely recognize who is there, but trust that this version is truer than all the previous ones. If you've come this far, it's not by chance. Your spiritual awakening is screaming for passage, and these 7 things that never come back, they have already started to fall apart, even if you haven't realized it yet. Now come here. Don't let this knowledge become just another video you watched and forgot. Apply that. He observes his life with new eyes. Notice where you are still holding what has already died. And if you want to continue diving deep into these teachings about high consciousness, if that made sense, you already know what to do, because what I share here is not shallow internet content. It's a real map for those who are willing to go through the portal of the 5th dimension and never go back to who they were before. And believe me, you won't want to go back.